Redditors who have hired a private investigator, what did you discover? My friend hired someone, only to find out his wife was just eating out alone, in parking lots without him. So is she cheating? Sir, I don't know how to tell you this, but she is cheating. I knew it. No, she is going out to dinner, alone. Specifically to get a quiet moment away from you. I was looking for a lost family member. I discovered he wasn't living anywhere under his name. He wasn't in jail. And that he hadn't collected his VA benefits. Turns out he was living homeless on the street. But the pie didn't find that part. Is he still on the streets, or has the VA assisted him with housing? Neither. He died still on the streets a few years after we reconnected with him. He was too mentally ill to accept VA assistance or allow himself to be hospitalized, but not sick enough to be helped involuntarily. So we just visited him and gave him cash, clothes, and food. Sadly, mental illness is the major cause for prolonged or repeated homelessness in an individual. I hired one to follow somebody suing me for a knee and hand injury. The pie put motion cameras outside where he lived. One morning he sent me a picture of guy wearing sunglasses asking me if that was him, which it was. Pie followed him through several red lights at high speed to a park. He then records him smoking pot and playing frisbee golf without limping. The guy he followed walked up to the pie suspicious, but he talked his way out of it. Pie fee was money well spent. Around 400. This one is sad. My dad hired a pie to see if my mom was cheating on him. Later that day the pie called him and told him he didn't even have to pay. It took him less than an hour to figure it out. Not me, but the insurance agency I worked for. We got this strange claim about children that were hurt in a frontal collision, while the parents filed no claim for themselves. The collision was against a wall. A few things in their account of the accident didn't check out, so the comp agent tasked an investigator. Investigator found out the parents sat their 2 children in the back seat with fastened seatbelts, then put a rock on the accelerator pedal to crash the car in the wall and get compensated for their children's injuries. Needless to say, while we did pay for the children's care, parents got no penny and ended having to deal with CPS. Worked for a law firm that routinely hired pies to investigate workers' comp claimants. One particular juicy bust involved a guy claiming a major back injury. Pie got a whole day's video of him doing a roofing job, hauling big packs of shingles up a ladder. Shit like that. They went to mediation ready to drop the video on this guy when he shows up in a wheelchair being pushed by his twin brother. The pie had been following the twin all day. Fastest check I've ever seen written by an insurance company. That a scummy competitor who ripped off my branding. 90 word for word on business name. Copy and graphics had several serious felony charges, including getting caught red-handed robbing someone at gunpoint by a passing police officer. What did you do with that info? Well, my business at the time was helping people in California start legal cannabis businesses. So I handled sensitive information like names, SSN, ENS etc. I was going to make a website exposing his criminal past, but by the time I got around to it, he was already gone. I assume he pissed off more than a few customers and ghosted them. The US Gov hired one for my security clearance. They found nothing. I told them about a juvenile felony I had, and they said they didn't find any records on it. Gave me a bit of hope that the Gov can't actually see everything law. Not me, but my former boss. She hired a pie to investigate a guy from my country who she was dating online. All the birthday cards, little gifts, and little etc. she sent him never reached him, because as it turned out, he never gave her his real name. She finally had enough and hired a pie. Guy was married and he lived further away from where he said he was located. My grandfather's attorney did. They found my old school records and tried to use them against me in court. This primarily focused on old grades and activities. I had awards in creative writing and had an active imagination. This was used to try and discredit the sexual abuse my grandfather inflicted on me. I had imagined it all based on what the detective found. Not me, but this is kind of a funny one. A friend of my father's hired one to find out whether he was still married or not. He had been separated for many years, but wasn't he sure whether his ex had ever actually divorced him. Sounds strange to me too, but that's how I heard it. He needed to know because he wanted to remarry. So what did he find out? That she had in fact divorced him and was also dead. So no worries on that front. I heard that's common at times, since people forget certain parts of their lives at times. One of my professors many years ago worked at a prosecutor's office and told the class that prior to getting married, everyone should get a PI to do work on their partner's past to see if they aren't hiding any marriages, debts, etc. prior to signing that contract. A word of advice I still remember to this date. My brother-in-law found out after he married my wife's sister that she had over 30k in CC debt. None of us knew. Talk about a shock to him. I once worked with a woman who suffered from a shopping compulsion. In her words, I can't walk past a store without going in. I can't go in without buying something. She had 300,000 in CC debt. She had gotten engaged to a man who insisted on a prenup that absolved him from her debts. About 6-7 years ago I made a solid attempt to try to find my father. Have never met him, but my son had just been born and I decided it was time. After many failures, I went to our RBI to ask them and was contacted by a PI out of the Northwest. He told me he would help me find the info I was looking for pro bono, on the one condition I don't give out his Reddit username. I said deal, and the next day I had an email with 5 potential names, addresses, phone numbers, etc. The second one down on the list was my father. I contacted him. It went terrible, and it really wasn't worth it. But I lines never forget that Redditor's kindness in helping me accomplish a 30 years goal. If you see this, thanks again, buddy. I worked under a PI as an intern for a while. Sometimes we would use a fake wanted fugitive poster to knock on people's doors and ask if they've seen the person in the area. We would use this tactic just to see who would answer the door, how the house looked, if anyone else lived in the house, etc. The amount of people who volunteer such information to complete strangers is nuts. Yes, we had badges and identification, but most people would never ask to see it in the first place. Ex-private investigator here. I worked a divorce case where we found out that the husband was a pedo and stalking nearby schools. My boyfriend actually was one for some time. His end of the job was more to photograph people and what they were doing at certain points of the day. Most of the time it was just a wife who was suspicious that their husband was cheating, or vice versa, and most times they were right. My coworker hired one to track down his first car he ever owned so he could buy it back. Cleanest E28 I've ever seen in person, that is. My cousin hired one against his dad and found out he was actually secretly married to his secretary. This was in Pakistan, and my cousin ended up telling his dad's family, and they are collectively just stopped talking to him. They haven't spoken in 6 years now. The dad tried to force them to accept his new wife as their mother, but it didn't work out. What was crazy was that Pakistan legally has polygamy, and it was all above the books. I was completely shocked. My cousin told me he got suspicious when his dad started taking solo business trips to the US and Japan a lot. Turns out, he was appeasing his new wife by taking her on trips all the time. My cousin knew the secretary had access to his dad's bank account, but he always assumed it was because he had to pay taxes in Canada as a dual citizen and needed someone to manage the finances. The stories he told me, it was nuts. Pies are actually pretty expensive in Pakistan, especially if you want a good one. But it was totally worth it for my cousin. I was one of the only witnesses in a rape and false imprisonment case. He pretended to be a cop and captured, handcuffed, and raped multiple women against a very wealthy man. During the course of the case, he hired a PI to follow me around and dig up dirt. However, at the time, I was working from home and left my house so infrequently and at such weird, non-regular hours that the guy basically gave up after 6 months and told his employer I was impossible to track or follow. I also lived in a massive high-rise with over 200 units, and the exit to the underground parking was behind a closed gate. out of sight from public view, so he could also never catch me coming or going. He also tried getting a hold of public records, but everything I had besides my lease was in another person's name. He tried to get up to my unit through security, also pretending to be a cop. And the building called me, and I told them not to let him up and to call the cops if he ever showed up again. He tried leaving notes with my doorman for me, I ignored them. He tried contacting all my friends and family, and thankfully all of them basically told him to duck off lol. Thought he was a cop or something. Anyways, that was funny and definitely didn't he dissuade me from testifying, and now the wealthy guy is in prison. The wife of the man my mother had an affair with hired a pie to follow them. By pure coincidence her daughter knew my sister and informed her what the pie found our parents going to hotels, taking vacations in Colorado. It was mind-blowing at the time, and it's funny because my mother still calls the woman who hired the pie a vindictive bitch, as if she wasn't the one sneaking around with a married man. That the dentist who took 6 sessions to just ruin my tooth and drill on a sore nerve wasn't he actually allowed to be a dentist. She immigrated, got covered by the medical practice during her stay, and fled back into her country as soon as she realized she did a mistake. Luckily they found her. Was she cheap? At least. IDK because I wasn't an adult then. Thus, my father received the bill. But most certainly, at least I cannot imagine another reason. Maybe except from personal relationships or SDH like that, I received a compensation. But honestly, I would have preferred a decent treatment. My jaw took damage, and won't he ever be able to recover. You can tell I have some trust issues. I worked for a private investigator. The dumbest cases were when people filed fraudulent workers' comp cases and then posted pictures all over their social media of themselves skydiving and shit when they alleged that they couldn't even walk. It was unbelievable the videos and pictures people would post after filing these claims with companies who had shit tons of money. Amapi in California. One workers' comp case, the claimant claimed that he couldn't walk more than 5 paces unless he had crutches, walker, or wheelchair. Was doing routine surveillance at his house when he came outside and changed all 4 tires on his truck. Got video of the tires being delivered where he hopped into the bed of the truck, picked up new tires, hopped down from the truck bed. Then he proceeded to crouch down for extended periods of time as he undid all the lug nuts laid under the car while getting the jack ready, jacking up the car, and fully replacing all 4 tires. Couldn't he walk more than 5 paces without crutches though? I was at work at a car shop one day and a guy met me there from Craigslist. I was trading him a set of 20-inch rims and tires for a running riding mower. When he arrived he came into my office and said I'd have to unload the mower myself because there was a workers' comp investigator following him. He pointed at a car at a daycare nearby and I just figured he was paranoid Craigslist character. Haha. I drove the mower off the trailer and loaded the wheels tires for him. He left after a small chat. I moved on to my next vehicle service, but kept watching the car he had pointed out. I figured since it didn't leave when he left, it couldn't be a pie. Well, a few minutes later the owner of that car walked across the field to my shop. He said his battery was dead and asked for a jump. He commented something like nice tractor. I figured it was a BS story about his battery, but I went and helped him jumpstart his car. He told me he came to pick up his kid at daycare and the car wouldn't start afterwards. It was legit dead. He had sat there watching us with his radio on and his headlights on, but the engine off, that he killed the battery as soon as his engine was running, and I unhooked the cables he was running to his driver door. I said, hey man, what about your kid? He ignored me and jumped in his car. As he started to speed off I yelled yes onto you. He stopped and backed up and asked me what I meant. Ruined his day finding out that the guy was hip to his presence. Never used one, but an insurance company had one follow me. Took a little while to notice, but once I did they gave up pretty quick. Here's the TLDR version. Grandma was sleeping with her daughter-in-law, but hired me to determine whether or not her son was sexually abusing her step-granddaughter. He wasn't though. They were just engaged in a consenting affair. So everybody is cheating on everybody in this redneck disaster. I still got paid though. I've never hired one. But I worked as a PI for a while. I have seen everything from people cheating on their spouses to stalkers to runaways. One of the most tangled messes I was hired for was a grandma who hired me to determine whether her 21-year-old step-granddaughter was being sexually abused by her stepfather. Stepfather is grandma's biological son. That's the only task I was given. Turns out the stepfather was not forcing her. She was willingly sleeping him and had been engaged in an affair with him for almost 2 years. To make things even more complicated, grandma was a lesbian and sleeping with stepfather's grandma's son wife and was trying to gain information to convince stepfather's wife to leave him for grandma. The true motive came out after I confronted grandma for not being forthcoming, because grandma paid a special visit literally minutes after step-granddaughter and stepfather drove away from stepfather's house to wait for grandma's lover. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.